Hey,
Good morning, attorney.
so I started the recording. So before we begin class, let us start with a prayer. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. They anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Okay. Can you turn off your microphone, class? Okay. Thank you. So, last time, class, we discussed medical ethics, its key issues. Okay. So, like organ donation, abortion, right to life, euthanasia, okay, and other issues involving ethical considerations in medicine. So, today, we, um, we will be discussing the right of the subject. Okay, so the right of the subject. So these are with respect to human research class. So in conjunction with this topic, we will discuss the Declaration of Helsinki. Okay, so this is the guiding principle in medical research involving human subject. Okay. So first, let's make a rundown of this PDF, PowerPoint presentation with regards to the right of the subject. So when you say a right class, so it is inherent to a person, okay? The person does not need to do anything, to perform anything to acquire this right. So a right is something a person has which people think should not be taken away, okay? Is inherent, okay? It is given by God, by the state, by any authority. It is a rule about what a person is allowed to do or have or not to do. Okay? So there are rights that you need to do. There are also rights that you don't, that prevents you to do something. Okay? For example, the right to do um, paying your taxes. Okay, it's your obligation. It is mandatory. So another, that's a right that you need to do. Another is the rights that prevents you from doing something is, for example, in the revised penal code, okay, where all crimes in the Philippines are listed, general crimes. Okay, so these are acts which prevents you to do something. So rights are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement. That is, rights are the fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of people or owed to people according to some legal system, social convention, or ethical theory. Okay? So like what we've discussed in our previous discussions, okay, for example, the code of ethics for the physicians, the different theory for ethics, okay, bioethics, medical ethics, the ontology, okay, the four pillars, okay, these are ethical principles or ethical guidelines class that will guide you in your practice of medicine, okay. So that those are social conventions, ethical theories. In the other hand, there are also legal guidelines which are part of the Philippine legal system, okay, or wherever you are living, you have your own legal system, okay. A right is something a person has which people think should not be taken away. It is a rule about what a person is allowed to do or have, okay. So this rights class being inherent, it cannot be taken away. For example, right to privacy. Okay, so if you are prevented from exercising this right, then you can go to court, okay, or go to the grievance machinery of the rules, okay, in order to question the act of the other party. So a right is different from a privilege, which is something that must be earned. Okay. So for example, privilege. Um, for example, the license of ABS-CBN class, it's a privilege. Okay. So it was taken away due to non-payment of taxes. Okay, that's an example. So which is something that must be earned. Rights may be put into law so they have legal protection. Okay. So what are the characteristics of rights? So rights are recognized by the society. So they are normative rules. They are part of the norm exercised by great number of people, okay, by the society. They are granted to the people by the state. Okay, for example, laws, okay, statute, and other governmental guidelines, memorandums, circulars, and so on and so forth. Rights and duties are correlated. Okay? Rights are dynamic in nature. When you say dynamic, they adapt to change. Okay? For example, right now it's a pandemic, so there are guidelines issued by the IATF, the national government, the Department of Health, okay, being the key agencies or frontliners in this fight. Next, rights are related to policy, but they differ in their nature, okay, depending on which authority which granted that right. So what are the types of rights? So moral rights, legal rights. So when you say moral rights, for example, the Ten Commandments, okay, from the Catholic religion. Legal rights, okay, political rights, economic rights, legal rights, the different laws, okay, which is made by the government. For example, the civil law, criminal law, okay. There are many laws class, thousands, okay, of laws here in the Philippines. Civil rights, okay, which governs the relationship of persons and family relations. Fundamental rights, which are constitutional rights, okay, guaranteed by the Constitution. Human rights, okay, another constitutional rights like rights against torture, okay, so there are many rights class. So 8 fundamental rights of subject. So this is with respect to human research. Okay. So of course, especially during this pandemic where cures are being expedited. Okay, the vaccines was expedited because supposed to be class trials in making a vaccine or making a medication would take years. Okay, many years. So in order to prevent any adverse reaction, okay? So supposed to be, it would take time to really create these medications or vaccines. However, due to the global pandemic, it was expedited. That is why there are many people, okay, does not want to be vaccinated. or to use medication with regards to COVID, because they think after 2 years they will become zombie, okay, or they will die because of this, because the process was expedite, okay, was fast track. However, class, of course, all people should be vaccinated in order to control the transmission of the virus. So in the Helsinki class, the Declaration of Helsinki and other guidelines, because as counterpart in the Philippines, we have our own guideline for human research. I think I have discussed this before. Okay. So the 8 fundamental rights of the subject are the following: right to information. Okay. So the subject must know the pros and cons, okay, of the research, okay, that he must participate. Right to access, okay, access of healthcare, okay, if there are any adverse reaction to the research. Right to rectification, okay, so if there are wrongs in the research process, it must be rectified. It is the job of the proponents who started the human research. Okay, for example, human research for cure for COVID-19. Okay. Next, the right to withdraw consent. Of course, if you start human research, you need the consent of the subject, the human subject. That's why there is a right to information, because you must tell everything before the start of the trial. Okay? And then the right to object. Okay? If, for example, there are pros and cons, the subject has a say. Okay, I don't want that to be part of the human research. Next, the right to object to automated processing. Okay, and then the right to be forgotten. So when you say the right to be forgotten, after the human research, okay, of course, there is storage of data or information. So there is a right of the subject to remove that. For example, after 3 years of the finality of the human research, okay, so the storage of data can be removed. So that's the right to be forgotten. Okay. So this is the diagram, class, the rights of the data subject. Okay, so the human, the persons who are the subject of human research. Okay, so right to information, right to access, right to rectification. Okay, right to erasure. Okay, so right to be forgotten. So these are the key issues that we will focus. Okay. So, who are the vulnerable population? So, vulnerable populations include the economically disadvantaged, racial and ethnic minorities, okay? The less represented class, okay? The marginalized sector of our country. So, they are the vulnerable population. The uninsured, the low-income children, the elderly, the homeless, those with human immunodeficiency virus or HIV, and those with other chronic health conditions, including severe mental illness. Okay, it may also include rural residents who often encounter barriers to accessing healthcare services. And then the vulnerability of these individuals is enhanced by race, ethnicity, age, sex, and factors such as income, insurance coverage or lack thereof, and absence of a usual source of care. Their health and healthcare problems intersect with social factors including housing, poverty, and inadequate education. Okay. So when you say vulnerable population class, they are the less privileged, excuse me, individuals. Okay. Um, part of the poverty line. okay, or the less represented, or excuse me, class, or those persons who are affected by illnesses, okay. So these people are considered vulnerable population. So these are discussed in this topic because more often than not, it's the vulnerable population that will participate on human research, of course, because they are paid. Okay? So that's why they are easily manipulated. So in order to protect their well-being, to protect them, there are guidelines such as this one, okay, Declaration of Helsinki, and other guidelines, okay, depending on the country. So vulnerable population refers to but is not limited to those who are incapable of protecting their own interest, and hence pregnant women, neonates, children, fetuses, prisoners, physically handicapped, mentally challenged, economically disadvantaged, institutionalized and very sick patients, and etc. Can all come under this group. Okay, so it is not limited only to the status of the person. Okay, it also includes physical immaturity like children. Okay, fetuses, or if the person is mentally challenged. Okay, so there are many aspects to consider, class, not just the health, but also the aspect of mentality, not sociality, okay, physicality. What else? Maybe religious aspect also, because there are religious practices that prevents someone to prevent someone to exercise something. Okay, for example, there's a religious groups that does not that that members of those religious group, okay, they prevent them from blood transfusion, okay, or something like that. So those are the vulnerable sectors of society. Okay, generally, class. Okay, so the ethical issues involving the vulnerable population for research are still debatable. The justification for involving the vulnerable population in research is mainly when a particular problem affects that group. Okay? So in a group, when there is a problem, so if that group is affected, then that group can be considered a vulnerable population. For example, right now we are in a pandemic. Okay? It's a global pandemic. So all of us, okay, humanity is a vulnerable population right now due to COVID-19 pandemic. Okay? So of course, different countries are they are in constant upgrade in their vaccination, in the medication of COVID. So of course, they need human subject. So for the protection of these persons, there are guidelines. Okay. However, it is important to understand that participation in biomedical research not only poses risk, but also may provide benefit to participants and society. Moreover, in today's world of evidence-based medicines, we must have evidence in the vulnerable population as well. Okay, so as part of the guideline, it must be an evidence-based medicine or evidence-based practice, okay, in order to protect the well-being of the vulnerable population. So one of the important points of concern in vulnerable population is that some lack the ability to consent or understand. Okay, so remember, as part of the definition of vulnerable population are those persons who are mentally challenged. Okay, so when they are, if you are a person that is mentally challenged, it means that you lack decision making. You cannot give consent, okay, because you are of unsound mind, Okay, so these persons are easily manipulated. For example, other persons who conduct the research, they just let those persons sign. And in law, signature is consent class. Okay? But it is still debatable because there are many considerations based on the guideline. Okay? Okay, remember the different rights, the right to information, the right to access, the right to be forgotten, and so on and so forth. These rights precedes, okay, these human research protocols, okay? So it must be placed in a higher pedestal, okay, compared to their protocols, for example, their company protocols, okay? So in that case, a legally acceptable representative should be involved in the decision. So for those mentally challenged, there must be an authorized representative, okay? Because there are human research that involves persons who are mentally challenged. For example, there are medications for Alzheimer's, okay? So of course, if the person has Alzheimer's, he lacks um, he lacks decision making. He does not have the power to give consent. So in order to protect his or her well-being, then there must be a person involved in order to protect the well-being of those mentally challenged persons. Okay? Further, vulnerable persons may require significant and repeated education or information about the research. Okay? So if you are a doctor class, you must be master of health teachings, especially if you conduct invasive procedure. Okay, remember last time we discussed the doctrine of informed consent. Okay, so if you will just perform an operation without this informed consent, of course you are at risk. Remember the three-pronged liability of doctors: civil liability, administrative liability, criminal liability. It will attach. Okay, so always be careful. Explain to the patient the pros and cons, and then after explaining everything and the patient understands, so let him sign the informed consent form. Okay, remember class, the purpose of the informed consent is not just for the patient but also for you. Okay, it's actually for your protection. Okay, so if there are any adverse effect of the operation, you are protected against malpractice suit. Okay? So, vulnerable persons may require significant and repeated education, okay, about the research, the benefit, the risk, and the alternatives, if any. As per the ethical guidelines for biomedical and health research involving human participants, research must be planned in vulnerable populations only if that population will benefit from research. Okay? Care should be taken that participants are not exploited. Okay, just like what I said earlier, the vulnerable population, excuse me, are easily manipulated, of course, because they are vulnerable. So research shouldn't be given any reward for encouraging the participants of their dependents. It is the duty of the investigators to give special attention to protecting the welfare of the vulnerable subjects, and to ensure voluntariness and freedom from coercion, to review justification for inclusion of such subjects, and to suggest additional safeguards for them. Okay? So like what I said earlier, there are guidelines for human research in order to protect the research subject. Okay? So if your company is conducting human trials, human research, for example, for a certain medication or vaccination, then these guidelines should be strictly followed. Okay? So one example of this guideline is the Helsinki Declaration that we will discuss after this one. Okay? However, there are many guidelines, class, depending on the place where you conduct the research. Okay, so as a general guideline, we will discuss the Helsinki declaration. So vulnerable populations includes the economically disadvantaged, racial and ethnic minorities, the uninsured, the low-income children, the elderly. Okay, we discussed this. Those that belongs to the poverty line threshold. So even if you are a healthy individual, but if you are inadequately educated, then still you are considered a vulnerable population. Health domains of vulnerable population. So the health domains of vulnerable population can be divided into categories: physical, psychological, and social. So these are the different aspect class that you need to consider. Okay? For example, if the human subject is physically fit, however, he is illiterate. Okay? So there is a mental consideration that you need to consider. Okay? So those with physical needs includes high-risk mothers and infants, the chronically ill and disabled, and persons living with HIV, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Okay? Chronic medical conditions includes respiratory diseases, diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, okay, and so on and so forth. So in the physical aspect class, you need to conduct history. Okay, you need to laboratories in order to ensure the health status of the person. On the other hand, the psychological domain, vulnerable population includes with chronic mental conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolar, and so on and so forth. Okay, so once again, do preliminary examinations in order to determine whether or not the person is fit mentally to undergo the trial. Okay? And the history, alcoholism, abuse, and those who are suicidal or prone to homelessness. Okay? So in the social realm, vulnerable population includes those living in abusive family, the homeless, the immigrants, and the refugees. Okay, so these are the example class. Persons who has problem socially. Okay, the less privileged, the homeless. Okay, or the immigrants, persons who are discriminated. Okay, subject to hate crimes. For example, the LGBTQ community. Okay, because it's like a new community, they are prone to hate. Have you heard that? Hate crimes. Even though the person is very good because he is an LGBT, there are many, okay, many unscrupulous person that would attack him or her. Okay, so these are examples class. The needs of these populations are serious, debilitating, and vital, with poor health in one dimension likely compounded by poor health in the others. Okay, so these aspects are interrelated. Of course, if you are a sick person physically, it would affect your social interaction and then your mental state. Okay, so these are interrelated. That's why before you start a human trial, then you must do the preliminaries. Okay? Those with multiple problems also face more significant comorbidities and cumulative risk of their illness than those experiencing a single illness. The need to focus on vulnerable populations, although the needs of medically vulnerable populations are serious, are often debilitating or life-threatening and require extensive and intensive medical and non-medical services. These needs tends to be underestimated. Okay, so if you are part of a company that conducts human research, then you must follow the guidelines class. Okay. Current financing and service delivery arrangements are not meeting the needs of these vulnerable populations. For example, the number of uninsured patients younger than 65 years of age grew by nearly 6 million between year 2000 and 2004, with the greatest growth in those who are poor. Okay, so based in the statistics, the vulnerable population class are uninsured. Okay, they are not financially stable. Okay, so that's why it is important to consider this. What if the adverse reaction of the trial is after 10 years, okay, of the research? So of course, these are vulnerable population. So by that time, there's still no money. That's why this vulnerable population should be insured, probably for a lifetime, by the company who conducts this type of research. Okay, so this population, approximately 35% to 45%, have at least one chronic medical condition. So when you say chronic, these are illness, okay, which are long term, okay, illness that persisted after 6 months. So they are chronic medical conditions. So more than half, 50% of those with a chronic illness without insurance report that they do not buy a prescription drug in 2003, excuse me, class, because of cost, and compared with 39% of those with publicly funded insurance and 34% of those with private insurance. Okay. Reproductive opportunities for choice. So reproduction choices or rights are legal rights and freedom relating to reproduction and reproductive health that vary amongst countries around the world. Okay, so this is another issue, class. Okay, the reproductive opportunities. So a male and a female, of course, they have different reproductive rights. Okay, because of the difference in their reproductive system. Yes. That's why female has more laws which is favorable to them, because in the reproductive system, they are the ones who will reproduce children. Okay, okay. So in a way, women are holy, class. Take note, male population of this class. Women are holy. Okay. So they are the gateway of the gateway. Their body is a gateway, class, in the spirit world, because once a child is born, a spirit enters. Okay, so the body of a woman, class, is sacred, to say the least, because they are a gateway. Okay, so I want you to, for the male population, you change your mindset right now. When you see a woman, tell them, you are sacred because you are a gateway. Okay? Attorney said, your body is a gateway to the spirit world. Because once life is created in the womb, there's a spirit that enters. Okay? So, the rights of individuals to decide whether to reproduce and have reproductive health. Okay? So, as a person, class, we have the right to reproduce or not to reproduce. Okay? So this includes an individual right to plan a family, terminate a sex pregnancy, use contraceptives, and gain access to reproductive health. Okay? So depending on the country you are living, class, they have their own reproductive laws. However, in the Philippines, because we are a religious-dominated country, of course, we are against abortion. Okay? So, however, in Congress, there are proposals to allow medical abortion. Okay? So, historically, the reproductive rights movement in the U.S. has been seen many controversies due to the moral, ethical, and religious undertones of birth control, abortion, and family planning. Okay? So, it's a case-to-case basis, class, depending on the country you are living. Okay? However, in a country, there are many laws respecting the reproductive system. Okay, reproductive protection for male and females. Question. Attorney, I have a question, attorney. Yes, what is your question? There is a new community right now, the LGBTQ community. Okay? So, there should be a law protecting this community. Okay? So, yes, class, there should. If there, I think there are members in the House of Representatives who are members of LGBTQ. So I think they crafted laws to protect the rights of this community. Okay. Next, let's talk about vendor relationship. Okay, of course, when you become physicians, though the practice of medicine is a noble profession, of course, it is also a livelihood. So more often than not, you will work with the different hospitals, different pharmaceuticals companies. Okay. So in this discussion, we will be talking about your relationship with the vendor. So building strong vendor relationship. So the first step to nurturing an effective business relationship is by establishing and maintaining a connection. Okay, you connect with other companies. Okay, as part of your practice. Of course, that's how you work as a doctor. You must have contacts. Okay, and then pay promptly. Sometimes, class, these companies, for example, pharmaceutical companies, they have commissions to the doctors if you prescribe their medication or product. Okay. Provide lead time, refer your vendor to colleagues, always under promise and over deliver. Okay, so as a matter of practice, do not promise too much, but of course you over deliver. Because sometimes if you promise, just like in a love triangle, okay, promises are made to be broken. So if you have a vendor relationship, you just don't worry, I will promote your product. I will something like that. Okay. Do not over promise. Okay. Under promise but over deliver. Okay. Understand the power of no. So do not give false assurances, class. Okay. To the vendor, especially to your clients. Be open to your clients. Sometimes, class, the comforting words, the assuring words of a good doctor is more important than the medicine itself. Okay? The medicine, class, will just come and go. It will treat the disease. It will treat the illness. But always put it in your mind and heart, the human responses. Okay? Your patient is human. Okay? Illness has left something in his psychological, in his physical aspect. So as a doctor, treat those human responses also, not just the disease, not just the illness. Okay? So talk to your client, reassure your client. Okay? You can use therapeutic touch, but be careful with the therapeutic touch, class, because sometimes it is controversial. Okay? Explain, be with your client. Okay? And then ask for referrals. Top 3 successful vendor relationship strategies. Okay, so when you become physicians or doctors, use these 3 strategies. Communicate often. Poor communication is at the heart of most business failures. Okay, so talk to the vendor. Okay, you must have their trust. Okay, and then they must trust you also. Develop fiduciary relationship to them also. Okay, so that you can communicate their vision, mission, goal to the patient, to the third party. Okay, build partnerships. The key to efficient vendor management is moving out of a transactional relationship and into a strategic supplier-buyer relationship model. Okay, so of course, these companies, they are partners. Okay, because you prescribe their products, for example, medication. So they are considered partners in the practice of medicine. Okay, and then create an environment for a win-win situation. Okay, of course, you know that the medication given produced by a certain company has many side effects or adverse reaction. Okay, so in order to create a win-win situation, not just for your vendors, to the client, okay, bear in mind the principle of the best interest. Okay, it should be your the guide for your action should be the best interest of your patients. Okay, now let's go to another issue, treatment of family members. Okay, so there's a principle, class, in, I don't know, it's an unwritten rule, an unwritten principle that says do not get involved to the treatment of your family member or to the case of your family member because you will be emotional. Your judgment will be clouded. Okay? So, just like, example, for me, I am a lawyer by profession. So, instead, if I have a family member who is imprisoned, I will let my colleagues handle that case because, of course, if I will participate, my judgment will already be clouded. Okay, because of the emotions. Okay, remember the song, just like emotions taking you over. So something like that. So it's the same with medicine. Okay, so if you know that one of your family member is sick, it's better to refer it to your colleague. Okay, so but of course, if you want to handle it personally, of course, you can do it. But it's better to refer it so that you will not be emotionally invested. Okay? So when the patient is an immediate family member, the physician's personal feelings may unduly influence his or her professional medical judgment. Or the physician may fail to probe sensitive areas when taking medical history or to perform intimate parts of the physical examination. Physicians may feel obligated to provide care for family members despite feeling uncomfortable doing so. They may also be inclined to treat problems that are beyond their expertise or training. Okay, so that is why you refer it instead. Similarly, patient may feel uncomfortable receiving care from a family member. A patient may be reluctant to disclose sensitive information or undergo an intimate examination when the physician is an immediate family member. Okay? For example, you have prostate problem and then your sister is a doctor. Your male sister, your sister is a doctor. So, of course, you will be reluctant to disclose if your, for example, if your scrotum needs to be palpated. So you will be reluctant because it will be your sister who will palpate. Okay? So that is why refer it to another colleague. Okay? To prevent this from this awkward situation. So in general, physicians should not treat themselves or members of their own families. However, it may be acceptable to do so in limited circumstance. Okay? Example, in an emergency, of course, it's an emergency, so you need to treat. However, after the emergency, you can refer it to your colleague. Settings or isolated settings where there is no other qualified physician available. In such situations, physicians should not hesitate to treat themselves or family members until another physician is available. Okay? So another situation for short-term minor problems, you can treat that. For example, your child has accident while riding a bicycle, you can treat that. When treating self or family members, physicians have a further responsibility too. However, while treating, you must document treatment or care provided so that you can endorse it to the next available physician and convey relevant information to the patient's primary care physician. Okay? Then recognize that if tension develop in the professional relationship with a family member, perhaps as a result of negative medical outcome, such difficulties may be carried over into the family member's personal relationship with the physician. Okay? Classic example, class. Example, your uncle, okay, got sick. You are a new doctor. And you will tell your titas, don't worry tita, I will take care of uncle. But of course, sadly, your uncle died because the sickness was, of course, critical. Who will blame? Okay? And the children are very emotional. Of course, and your tita. So maybe those family members will blame you. So it's more important, class, to refer. Okay? So recognize also that if tensions develop, so that's what you call professional, I forgot the term, professional hazard also. Okay? In conducting in the practice of your profession. Professional hazard. Avoid providing sensitive or intimate care, especially for a minor patient who is uncomfortable being treated by a family member. Recognize that family members may be reluctant to state their preference for another physician or decline a recommendation for fear of offending the physician. Okay, that's why open communication is very important. Family therapists arguably face more ethical challenges than individually oriented therapists, yet codes of conduct and ethics have not always been of direct assistance. Often, it seems that the principles lack the specificity to really attend to the issues at hand. Further, couple and family therapy presents challenges which are often erroneously assumed to be covered under general principles about counseling and psychotherapy. A significant values difference between couple and family therapy and other mental health services is an appreciation of context, which is grounded in the foundational premise of the family as a system. Okay? So this means that it is the relationship that is the focus of study, and all relationships are seen to exist within multiple other systems, including therapeutic system. Okay? So there is a study with regards to the therapeutic systems with regards to family members. So even in the studies, there are frictions or tensions because of the emotional aspect. Okay? So that is why, class, if you become doctors in the future, you just refer those family members to your colleagues. Okay? Do you understand, class? I think this is new. Everything I say, it is recorded. Can you see, class, at the side of the chat box? Hello, class? Can you hear me?
Yes, Doc. Na, Doc.
This is new. I'm loving this new model. Yes, so model. This new improvement of Teams. So far, class, do you have any questions with our discussion today with regards to human research? Come again? None?
Ako, Doc.
Nan.
Yes. Yes. After dark, magigibutang sa kuan o transcript. After dark.
I have question, Doc.
Yes, please. What's the question?
If ever, Doc, ba, during our practice, we commit some mistakes, do we need to defend ourselves by hiring a lawyer, or the board of medicine will be the one to protect us?
Actually, class, it depends, class. If administrative, of course, at the preliminary, you need to defend yourself. But later on, when you submit position papers, I think you need to hire a lawyer because it's a legal aspect. Administrative cases, your license can be removed. Okay?
So Doc, no one will protect us?
Of course, if you committed malpractice, you need to protect yourselves. Because the subject is your license. But of course, you can ask help probably to the organization. What's your organization for doctors?
Board of Medicine? I
The Board of
guess.
Medicine is the
PMA.
board, but PMA, Philippine
PM.
Medical Association.
Oo.
Like for lawyers, our organization is IBP, Integrated Bar of the Philippines. And then the counterpart for the board is the Supreme Court. Okay? Do you have any further questions?
No, na Doc. Thank you so much, Doc.
Okay, thank you, Miss Renafel Bobole. Kuya po din mga transcript, oh.
Attorney,
Thank you.
Attorney, I have a
Yes.
question.
Yes, Muhammad.
Yes, the earlier you said that prescribing the specific medicines from specific company gives profit to the doctors. So
Yes.
I faced this thing in the Philippines. I been to a doctor in private clinic here, and he prescribed me medicine that's
Yes.
only available in his pharmacy. I cannot find
Yes.
in another pharmacy outside, like Mercury Drugs, like Rose Pharmacy, Watson. I cannot find. So
Yes.
so what could be the problem, or like any is it legal or illegal doing this?
Actually, it's not the problem of legality because once it is in the market, of course, it is legal because it's been approved by Food and Drugs Authority. Okay, it's a question of ethics, Mr. Muhammad. Okay, so what if that medicine is not? I'm not saying it's not effective, but there are adverse reaction. Okay, but still, the doctor is prescribing it because not all, okay, but more often than not, that's how pharmaceutical company team with doctors. Okay, you prescribe our medicine and then we give you something. Okay, so it's a question of ethics, of morality. That's why we are discussing medical ethics, Mr. Muhammad. Okay, so in legality, maybe depends on the legal requirements you can attack. But with regards to prescription, so if it is prescribed by doctor, so more often than not, it's already been approved by the government. So it's a question of ethics, Mohammed.
Yes,
You
attorney,
understand? Yes.
but there is a thing that make a sense, like why this medicine is only available in his or her pharmacy, why not in other pharmacy? Of course, there's a lot of medicines that's available in the private pharmacy and as well as in the other pharmacy outside the hospitals. Like
Yes.
there's a question.
Yes. So like what I said earlier, it's a matter of ethics because actually there are many medicine with the same, what do you call that? Generic or the same effect. But maybe in
Yes.
that specific doctor has a partnership with that specific company producing that medicine. So that's why maybe it's a promotional or that doctor is exclusively distributing the medicine. So that's some reasons probably, Mr. Mohammed. We cannot say that it is illegal or something like that, but more often than not, that's how companies work. Okay, they have partnership with doctors. So maybe the company wants to work with doctor directly, because unlike in pharmaceutical companies outside where no one will buy, so their medicine will just get expired. Maybe that medicine is specific medicine that only that doctor is specializing, something like that.
Yes, maybe.
Yes.
Attorney,
So
may I add?
yes.
Actually, in the Generics Act of 1988, it is not illegal to suggest a brand. It becomes illegal if the doctor is only writing
The brand name.
just the brand name, and if there is written there that's no substitution, that's the
That
time
is
it's
correct.
illegal.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Jasmine, because of course generic drug is being protected, not just for the people, because branded medication are very expensive because of the name. So that is why the Generics Act was passed, okay? So that the patients will also be guided by the different alternatives, okay, which are not that expensive. So that's the reason behind that law, that the generics name should be written, okay? If the
Attorney.
doctor, yes.
Actually, yeah, I agree with you. Like when I go to the mercury drugs, even they cannot understand what medicine. Like there is some medicines, doctors that they are writing the brand name. So
Yes,
they have alternative, as you earlier mentioned that they have alternative names, like they have same salt or like base name, like they are
generic
giving
names.
some.
Yes,
But
that is
they
correct.
even don't have that kind of thing in with within their pharmacy. It's
You
so
can
kind of horrible.
Yes, as a patient, your remedy is you can raise that to the proper authorities. For example, the Board of Medicine, because it is already regulated and there is a law protecting protecting you as a patient. Okay, that a patient should remember you have the right to refuse treatment as part of your right of being a patient. So, of course, you have also the corresponding right to choose how you are treated. Okay? So, for example, buying alternative medicine which has the same effect. Okay? So, you are already protected by the Generics Act as propounded by Miss Jasmine. Okay?
Maybe it's also a new brand, Muhammad. That's why
Yes,
it's part of marketing strategies of
that is correct.
pharmaceutical companies to first introduce to the doctors before they will add another advertisements in like radio or TV.
Yes, that is correct. So, it's a marketing
Okay, okay.
ploy, maybe, Mr. Muhammad. Okay?
Yes, Tony. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions, class? Yawan ning transcript. Oy, kira magibutang. Ni-replyan.
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, class. So, we will proceed. We will proceed to our next topic. So, our next topic, class, is the World Medical Association. Can you see in your screen, class?
Yes, attorney.
Yes, attorney.
Okay. So, in the next topic, class, is the guideline from the World Medical Association. So, this is the general guideline, class. Okay. So, depending on the country, they can adapt this or they can also make their own guideline. In the Philippines, I think we have made our own guidelines, okay, in consonance with this one. However, if we have our own guidelines, we can also use this one as a general guideline, okay? Because this is from the World Medical Association class, okay? So, this is the Declaration of HELSINKI, Ethical Principles for Medical Research Involving Human Subjects. The provisions of this declaration, class, we have already discussed earlier. So we will just make a rundown of this declaration for your information and guidance. By the way, class, the copy of this declaration is in the files. So check it out if you have time. So this was adopted in Helsinki, Finland on June 1964. Okay, that's why this is called the Declaration of Helsinki, an assembly by the World Medical Association. Okay, and then this was revised in Tokyo, Japan in 1975, revised again in Venice, Italy 1983, revised again in Hong Kong September 1989, revised again in South Africa 1996, in Edinburgh, Scotland, the year 2000. Okay. In October 2002 in Washington, D.C., there was an added note or clarification. And then again in Japan in 2004, there was an addition also. And then in the Republic of Korea, Seoul, 2008, it was revised. And then lastly, in 2013, it was revised. Okay. So its revision, class, is to address the need of the time. Okay. So preamble, which is the opening statement. The World Medical Association has developed the Declaration of Helsinki, a statement of ethical principles for medical research involving human subjects, including research on identifiable human material and data. Okay. So this serves as a guideline, class, for human trials. Okay, because like what we discussed earlier, for example, the vulnerable population, they more often than not, they are the ones who are subject of human trials because of their status. They have no money, and of course, if you are part of the research, you are given incentive, given payments. Okay, of course, you are poor, so you can't do anything but to participate. That's why they are easily exploited, easily manipulated. Okay? So that's why this guideline was made. The declaration is intended to be read as a whole, and each of its constituent paragraphs should be applied with consideration of all other relevant paragraph. Okay? So if there are doubts in the application of the provisions of this act, of this declaration, then it must be read in its entirety. Okay? Consistent with the mandate of the World Medical Association, the declaration is addressed primarily to physicians. The World Medical Association encourages others who are involved in medical research involving human subjects to adopt these principles. Okay? So this declaration is directed to physicians, class, you being the frontliners, okay, of human research, human trials. So, however, other persons are not precluded to adopt these principles. Okay, so who are these people? Okay, for example, the owner of the company who are not doctors, the board of directors, okay, the scientists who will conduct the trial. Okay, so this guideline is a guideline for all, not just for physicians. However, a physician must participate in a medical trial in order to protect the welfare of the subject, okay, the human subject. So general principles, the Declaration of Geneva of the World Medical Association binds the physician with the words, the health of my patient will be my first consideration. Okay? Remember in the Hippocratic Oath, there's this line, okay? So it is binding upon you by virtue of this line. And the International Code of Medical Ethics declares that a physician shall act in the patient's best interest when providing medical care. Okay? It is the duty of the physician to promote and safeguard the health, well-being, and rights of the patient. Okay? So we have discussed the fundamental rights earlier, including those who are involved in medical research. The physician's knowledge and conscience are dedicated to the fulfillment of this duty. Okay? So it is your bounden right, class, okay, your obligation to your fellow men that you need to uphold these guidelines. Medical progress is based on research that ultimately must include studies involving human subjects. Okay, so this declaration is very relevant today due to the pandemic. Okay, because everything was fast tracked from the vaccination, from the medication. Okay, so even alternative medicines was used. Have you heard about lingua? Okay, right now there's a medicine for COVID. I forgot the name. Molnupiravir. I forgot. I forgot the name, class. But there's a oral medication for COVID right now, and also vaccines. Okay, in order to protect the people from the transmission of the virus. The primary purpose of medical research involving human subjects is to understand the causes, development, and effects of diseases and improve preventive, diagnostic, and therapeutic intervention. Okay? So the aspect class are the methods, the procedures, and treatment. So these are the aspects that needs to be considered in order to be improved. Okay? Not just the result. The procedure must be perfected, the treatment modalities perfected, the methods must be perfected. That's why we are utilizing human trials, okay? So even the best proven interventions must be evaluated continually to research for their safety, effectiveness, efficiency, accessibility, and quality, okay? So this is a continuing obligations for doctors class. Okay? It's your obligation to address the need of the time. Okay? So just like this declaration which has been updated from time to time, then it is incumbent also for you to update your skill, your knowledge, and your attitude for the benefit of your patients, okay? For your profession, medicine being a noble profession. Medical research is subject to ethical standards that promote and ensure respect for all human subjects and protect their health and rights, okay? So medical research class is interrelated with medical ethics, okay? There must be ethical consideration in order for this guideline to succeed. Okay? So ethics and research, they are part and parcel of each other. It's like a coin. Okay? It's like a coin with the two sides. One side is research, the other side is ethics. Okay? So interrelated. Cannot utilize the other by not utilizing for example, you cannot utilize research by not utilizing ethics. So while the primary purpose of medical research is to generate new knowledge, this goal can never take precedence over the rights and interests of individual research subject. Okay? So the purpose of research class is to improve, okay? To generate knowledge, to learn something new. However, it must be a balancing act with the best interest of the subject, the human research, okay? So next, it is the duty of physicians who are involved in medical research to protect the life, health, dignity, integrity, right to self-determination, privacy, and confidentiality of personal information of the research subject. Remember, class, our discussion on the Code of Professional Responsibility for Doctors. Okay, so this provision is already integrated in your code. So that your code for physicians as as passed by PRC and Board of Medicine is like a collection of guidelines. Okay, it's like a master list of guidelines for your practice, okay, for the protection of your patients. So the responsibility for the protection of research subjects must always rest with a physician or other healthcare professionals and never with research subjects even though they have given consent. Okay, remember the issue of consent, class? So for example, for mentally challenged subjects, they cannot give consent because they don't have sound mind. So an authorized representative must also intervene, okay, in order to protect the well-being of that person. Okay, because for example, the subject of the research is Alzheimer's disease, okay, medication for Alzheimer's disease. So of course, more often than not, the participants are those who are experiencing Alzheimer's, okay? So in order to protect their well-being, there must be a person, okay, of sound mind, probably a relative, okay, or a guardian appointed by the court in order to oversee the procedure. Physicians must consider the ethical, legal, and regulatory norms and standards for research involving human subjects in their own countries. Okay, like what I said earlier, it's a case-to-case basis, class, depending on the law or rules operational in your respective countries, as well as applicable international norms and standards. Okay, so this declaration of Helsinki is the generally accepted international norm and standard which guides those countries who wants to make their own guidelines, okay? So they can adapt this one, or they can make depending on their situation, they can also make their own rules in consonance of this one. So because this is the general guideline. No national or international ethical, legal, or regulatory requirements should reduce or eliminate any of the protection for research subjects set forth in this declaration. Okay? So, a country, class, can add, but they cannot restrict, okay, the provision in this declaration. Okay? They cannot eliminate the protection clauses in this declaration. Okay? So this is a notice to the whole world. You can add, but you cannot eliminate certain provisions. Okay? So medical research should be conducted in a manner that minimizes possible harm to the environment. Okay? So you have an obligation to the patient. At the same time, you have an obligation to the environment. Okay? Like what I said earlier, research is part and parcel of ethics. So ethics generally is a broad term, okay? So it also affects the environment. It also affects relationship, also affects the rights of the individuals, okay? So you, as a doctor, you must approach it in a holistic approach, class, okay? So what are these aspects? Physical aspects, mental aspect, social aspect, environmental aspect, okay? Many aspects, class, that needs to be considered. Medical research involving human subjects must be conducted only by individuals with appropriate ethics and scientific education, training, and qualifications. Okay, so it means that persons involved in human subject must be conducted by experts in their field. Okay, research on patients or healthy volunteers requires supervision of a competent and appropriately qualified physician or other healthcare professionals. Okay, so when you say healthcare professionals, class, these are a team of allied health workers. Who are these? Of course, the doctors being the lead, the team leader, the nurses, the aides, okay, the therapists, and so on and so forth. Even the prime mover class, the ones who transfers patient, okay, the ones who change the oxygen, even the assistants of the nurses, the medical aides, the ones who cleans the room, okay, so they are part of the healthcare professional class. You can never look down on those people, okay? So groups that are underrepresented in medical research should be provided appropriate access to participate in research. Okay, remember as part of the rights that we have discussed earlier, the subjects have the right to decline, okay, or to change their how the research is conducted. Okay, physicians who combine medical research with medical care should involve their patients in research only to the extent that this is just justified by its potential preventive, diagnostic, or therapeutic value. And if the physician has good reason to believe that participation in the research study will not adversely affect the health of the patients who serve as research subjects. Okay. Appropriate compensation and treatment for subjects who are harmed as a result of participating in research must be ensured. Okay, so your job, class, being doctors, is to protect and promote the well-being of your patients. Okay, so if you are the head in a research facility, then it is incumbent upon you to protect the human subjects, okay? Compensate them, treat them, because some adverse reaction class or side effect will manifest not immediately, probably after 5 years, after 10 years, and this will manifest like neurologically, okay? Neurological effect, okay? Psychological effect. So all of this must be considered. Now, let's go to the risks, the burdens, and the benefits. So, in medical practice and in medical research, most interventions involve risks and burdens. Of course, it involves risk because of the side effect. That's why the vulnerable population should be protected. Okay? Medical research involving human subjects may only be conducted if the importance of the objective outweighs the risks and burdens to the research subject. Okay, as a rule, class, if the benefit outweighs the risk, then hello, can you hear me, class? So as a rule, class, if the benefit outweighs the risk, then medical research should be conducted. Okay. All medical research involving human subjects must be preceded by carefully assessment of predictable risk. So take history seriously, medical history, laboratory examinations, and so on and so forth in the preliminaries class. And burdens to the individuals and groups in the research in comparison with foreseeable benefits to them and to other individuals or groups affected by the condition under investigation. Okay, so the role, class, the risk, the benefits must outweigh the risk. Okay, measures to minimize the risk must be implemented. Okay, so there must be a protocol to minimize the risk. The risk must be continuously monitored, assessed, and documented by the researcher. Of course, you must safeguard the health and safety of the research subject. So you must continuously monitor, document everything. Okay? Physicians may not be involved in a research study involving human subjects unless they are confident that the risks have been adequately assessed and can be satisfactorily managed. Okay? As a rule, again, if the benefit outweighs the risk, then you proceed. If not, cancel. Okay? When the risks are found to outweigh the potential benefit or when there is conclusive proof of definitive outcomes, physician must assess whether to continue, modify, or immediately stop the study. Okay? Being the leader, class, of the research study, it is incumbent upon you to promote and prevent the risk. I mean, promote the health of the patient or the human subject and prevent or minimize the risk. Okay? If the risk outweighs the potential benefit, then cancel or modify, okay, the research study. So we have discussed earlier who are the vulnerable groups and individual. Okay. So some groups and individuals are particularly vulnerable and may have an increased likelihood of being wronged or incurring additional harm. Okay. So vulnerable individual they are exploited, manipulated class. That's why they must be protected. Okay. All vulnerable groups and individuals should receive specifically considered protection. Medical research with a vulnerable group is only justified if the research is responsive to the health need or priorities of this group, and the research cannot be carried out in non-vulnerable group. Okay, so example earlier, Alzheimer's. Okay, they are participants are vulnerable group because they are mentally challenged, because they have Alzheimer's, because the subject of human research is creation of a new drug to counter Alzheimer's. Okay, so that's why as a doctor, you need to make sure that the welfare and well-being of this human subject are protected, okay, are being safeguarded. So in addition, this group should stand to benefit the knowledge, practices, or intervention that result from the research. Okay. So another classic example is because of this pandemic, there are vaccines. Okay. So scientific requirements and research protocol. So medical research involving human subject must conform to generally accepted scientific principles. Okay, we have discussed that earlier. The different guidelines. It must be in consonance with this declaration. Okay, based on the thorough knowledge of the scientific literature, other relevant sources of information, and adequate laboratory and as appropriate animal experimentation. The welfare of an animal used for research must be respected. Okay. So earlier we discussed that the proponents of the research study must be experts. Okay. So in conjunction with the subjects, there are also animal rights. Okay, before class or even today, research, they are using mouse, okay, in order to know whether or not a vaccine or a medication is effective. So I think million of mouse has already died by virtue of research. Okay, so that's why there are animal rights also. Animals have rights also. So in retrospect class, we need also to protect the rights of the animals involved, okay, and then respect their use for research, okay. So I don't know what are the existing protocols of animal rights. We'll just stick to the rights of the human research subjects, okay? So the design and performance of each research study involving human subjects must be clearly described and justified in a research protocol, okay? So there must be a guideline, okay? A manual, a protocol for that. Okay, the research must not be conducted like immediately without any written rules. Okay, so rules first must be approved before conducting the research. There must be protocols already. The protocol should contain statement of ethical considerations involved and should indicate how the principles in this declaration have been addressed. The protocol should include information regarding funding, sponsors, institutional affiliations, potential conflict of interest, incentive for subject, and information regarding provisions of treating or compensating subject who are harmed as consequence of participation in this research study. Okay? So like what I said earlier, class, the protocols must be in consonance of this declaration. So in the protocols, it must be written how this guideline was implemented, okay, the rights of the subject, okay, the aftermath, okay, even after research, what are the protocols also. For example, the subjects are insured, okay, for a specific period of time, say 10 years, if there are side effects that would occur at that time, okay? So those are the example, class. So in clinical trials, the protocol must also describe appropriate arrangement for post-trial provisions. So this is what I'm saying, that there must be an aftercare, okay? After the research, the welfare of the research subjects, human subjects, must also be protected through insurance maybe, okay? Or continuous monitoring every 6 months and so on and so forth. So there's a research ethics committees which you are part because you are the proponent being doctors. So the research protocol must be submitted for consideration, comment, guidance, and approval to the concerned research ethics committee before the study begins, okay? So before you begin the research, then it must be approved by the research committee, okay? So this committee must be transparent and its functioning must be independent of the researcher, the sponsor, and any other undue influence, and must be duly qualified, okay? So I think, class, in the Philippines, there is a health regulatory ethics board, Philippine Health Regulatory Ethics Board. If we are friends in Facebook, I participated in that. It's a FREB, okay? So I participated in the research board, and then we discussed many topics, class, very interesting with regards to human research in time of pandemic, okay? And of course, the Declaration of Helsinki was discussed, being the general guideline for human research, okay? It must take into consideration the laws and regulation of country or countries in which the research is to be performed, as well as applicable international norms and standards, but this must not be allowed to reduce or eliminate any protection for the research subjects set forth in this declaration, okay? So the board, class, they can provide additional guidelines, but they cannot restrict or eliminate the protection given by the Declaration of Helsinki, okay? The committee must have the right to monitor ongoing studies. The researcher must provide monitoring information to the committee, especially information about any serious adverse events. No amendment to the protocol may be made without consideration and approved by the committee. After the end of the study, the researcher must submit a final report to the committee containing a summary of the study's findings and conclusions, okay? So the committee, class, or the board is like a third-party monitoring system, okay? So you give your proposal and then they monitor. So they will even monitor the study after it is conducted, okay? So I think in the Gullias College of Medicine, class, we are creating a committee. And like what Dean said, I will be the chairman, or Dean will be the chairman, I forgot. Okay, so this committee is the ethics committee. I forgot the name of the committee that we will create, because this is mandatory, class, because you will have your own research study. I mean, ethics, I forgot. You will conduct, as part of your requirement before graduation, you will conduct a research study. And then it must be approved by the committee. So Dean is creating that committee, and of course I am playing a role being a lawyer I'm playing a role in the creation of that committee. Okay? But for purposes of the National Committee, the FREB or the Philippine Health Ethics Regulatory Board is the National Committee. Okay? I just participated in the National Convention, I think 2 weeks ago. It's a 2-day convention. I represented the Goliath College of Medicine in that convention. It was wonderful class. I also gave my my clarifications, my questions, okay, in order to really test the existing protocols, okay, whether or not it is whether or not the existing protocols address the issues at the moment, okay, address the issues of the human subject, okay. Of course, privacy and confidentiality, very important. It is even integrated in all parts of subject of the College of Medicine or the practice of medicine. Every precaution must be taken to protect the privacy of research subject and the confidentiality of their personal information. Okay, remember the right to be forgotten. Another important aspect, class, informed consent. Okay, not just for the protection of the subject, but for the protection of yourselves, the doctors. Okay, participation by individuals capable of giving informed consent as subjects in medical research must be voluntary, although it may be appropriate to consult family members or community leaders. No individual capable of giving informed consent may be enrolled in a research study unless he or she freely agrees. Okay? I will just make a rundown class since it's already 12:34. Okay? I posted this already in the files, but if you don't have a copy, I can send it to you. Okay? Some of these provisions we already discussed and just are matters of reading. Okay? So in medical research involving human subjects capable of giving informed consent, each potential subject must be adequately informed of the aims, method, source of funding, and etc. We have discussed that earlier class. Okay? So in informed consent, the pros and cons, all aspects, even the outcome must be discussed. Okay? So after ensuring that the potential subject has understood the information, the physician or another appropriately qualified individual must then seek the potential subject freely given informed consent. Okay? So how would they give their consent? Through signing, okay, let them sign the informed consent form. All medical research subjects should be given the option of being informed about the general outcome and the result of the study. Still part of the rights of the persons class, okay, that we have discussed earlier. We have discussed informed consent. For a potential research subject who is incapable of giving consent, we have discussed that there must be a person who is of sound mind and sound mind also must be present in order to protect the welfare of the subject. Okay, so we have discussed that. Research involving subjects who are physically or mentally incapable of giving consent, we have already discussed earlier. The physician must be fully informed of the patient, which aspect of care and are related to the research. The refusal of a patient to participate in a study or the patient's decision to withdraw from the study must never adversely affect the patient-physician relationship. Of course, it's part of the right, okay, to refuse treatment. However, it must not affect your patient-doctor relationship. Okay? For medical research using identifiable human material or data, such as research or material or data contained in biobanks or similar repositories, physician must seek informed consent for its collection. Okay, even though there are previous data class, those persons who are participated on those previous research, you still need to get their consent. Okay, if you use those datas. Okay, remember, I told you that once research is done, There are data storage, okay, that would store the data, maybe 5 years, up to 10 years, okay? But you need to ask their permission if you want to use those data, okay? We have discussed that already. The use of the placebo. So, because it is a trial, there are guidelines also. Okay, the use of the actual medicine, the use of the placebo, whether or not there are effects. Okay, so the benefits, risk, burdens, and effectiveness of a new intervention must be tested against those of the best proven intervention, except the following circumstance. Where no proven intervention exists, the use of placebo or no intervention is accepted, or where for compelling and scientifically sound methodological reasons, the use of any intervention less effective than the best proven one. The use of placebo or no intervention is necessary to determine the efficacy or safety of an intervention. If the drug class has no counterpart to test its efficacy, then you can use a placebo as part of the trial, okay? So post-trial provisions, we have discussed already. Okay, there must be monitoring, aftercare, okay? Research, registration, and publication, dissemination results, just a matter of reading class. Okay, because it is a study, you must publish it for the community. You must submit reports to the board. Okay. So we have discussed that. Unproven interventions in clinical practice, just a matter of reading. Okay. So class, this declaration is in the file, so check it out. The provisions are just matters of reading. We have also discussed the different concept with regards to the vulnerable group and with regards to other provisions for the protection of the human subject. Okay? So, class, can you hear me, class?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, attorney.
Okay. So, class, do you have any questions with regards to our topic today?
None, attorney.
None? Okay, so if there's none, class, Mr. Abdul, can you, for attendance purposes, please take a screenshot?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, attorney.
Okay. So, class, open your camera for the screenshot. And then after the screenshot, we can take our lunch. Sorry, it's already 12:40. I lose track of time.
Sige guys, please turn on your camera.
Okay.
Oh, 1, 2, 3, smile. Another one, 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you guys.
Thank
Attorney.
you, Mr. Abdul. Thank you, class. Take your lunch now. Sorry for our late Bugay Tanahuman. Bye,
Thank you,
Thank you,
class.
attorney.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Happy lunch, attorney.
Thank you, attorney.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I led